Next topic, budget. Indian budget system. Before detailed discussion, just listen the framework of budget. Budget is an annual financial statement of the government. Budget is a statement of anticipated expenditures and estimates of expected revenue of the government for the coming financial year. Next, budget has two accounts. First, revenue account or revenue budget. Second, capital account or capital budget. Then we should know the receipts and expenditures in revenue account. Revenue account shows the current receipts of government and the expenditures that can be met from these receipts. Revenue budget shows the current revenue receipts of government and the current revenue expenditures of government. Next, revenue receipts. Revenue receipts are non-redeemable in nature. That is, they cannot be reclaimed from the government. Revenue receipts are divided into two: tax revenues and non-tax revenues. Next, tax revenues. Tax revenue comprises of direct and indirect taxes. Direct taxes which fall directly on individuals. Examples for direct taxes are income tax, personal income tax, tax on individuals, corporate tax, tax on companies or corporates. By corporates we mean big companies. Wealth tax, gift tax. These are examples of direct taxes. Next, indirect taxes like excise duties, customs duties, service tax, etc. By excise duties we mean tax levied on commodities produced within the country. By customs duties, theoretically we mean tax on imports and exports. Practically, customs duty tax on imports. Interest fees, fines collected by the government. Dividend and profits on investment made by the government, grants received by government, etc. Now you know revenue receipts. Revenue receipts are divided into tax and non-tax revenues. Next, revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure consists of all those expenditures of government which do not result in creation of physical and financial assets. Revenue expenditures are not creating any physical or financial assets. Revenue expenditures are for the normal functioning of the government. Revenue expenditures are for the normal functioning of government departments and various services of the government. Examples for revenue expenditures: salary for government employees, pensions, grants given to states and other organizations, etc. Now you know revenue account. A budget has two accounts, revenue account and capital account. In revenue account, we discussed revenue receipts and revenue expenditures. Next, capital account or capital budget. Capital account consists of capital receipts and capital expenditures. Capital account or capital budget is an account of assets as well as liabilities of the government, which considers changes in capital receipts and capital expenditure. Next, capital receipts. All receipts of government which create liability or reduce government's financial assets are called capital receipts. Capital receipts creating financial liability for the government. Main items of capital receipts are loans raised by the government, government loans from RBI, commercial banks and other international organizations. Recoveries of loans by the government, government borrowings from national savings deposits, provident funds, revenues from disinvestments. These are capital receipts of government. Next, capital expenditure. By capital expenditure, we mean all expenditures of government creating physical or financial assets are known as capital expenditures. So capital expenditures create physical and financial assets. All expenditures of government creating physical or financial assets are known as capital expenditure. Capital expenditures include expenditure on acquisition of land, building, machinery, etc. Government investments in shares, bonds, securities, loans and advances given by central government to states, UTs, PSUs, etc. Now you know capital account of a budget. Capital account consists of capital receipts and capital expenditures. Now you know total receipts in a budget is equal to revenue receipts plus capital receipts. Total expenditure in a budget is equal to revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. This is the simple framework of budget. The simple framework of a budget. A budget has two accounts, revenue account and capital account. Under revenue account, we have revenue receipts and revenue expenditures. Under capital account, we have capital receipts and capital expenditures. Next, total receipt of a budget is equal to revenue receipts plus capital receipts. Total expenditure of a budget is equal to revenue expenditures and capital expenditures. Next, budget in detail. Detailed discussion of Indian budget system.